Today, with Bedtime Stories with Mommy J, I'm going to be reading Chapter 3 of George Brown Class Clown Super Burp by Nancy Krulik and illustrated by Aaron Butcher. Chapter 3. George followed his new classmates into the school gym. The kids all had sickly looks on their faces, but Mrs. Kelly looked really excited. Okay, everyone choose your partners, Mrs. Kelly said. George frowned. No one ever picked the new kid as a partner. He was going to have to do whatever the awful thing was all by himself. I'll be your partner, the girl named Juliana said to George. Since I'm your buddy, it's kind of my job. George looked around the room. Was this the kind of thing you did with a girl? Or was it the kind of thing fourth grade guys did together? Then he saw everyone else had broken off into boy-girl pairs. Okay, he told Juliana. Mrs. Kelly plugged her MP3 player into the speakers. Then she reached down and pulled something from her bag. Oh no, the kid with the curly hair smacked his forehead. Not the straw hat. Alex, shh, Juliana warned. Mrs. Kelly was putting on a straw farmer's hat. It looked pretty dumb on her, especially since Mrs. Kelly was wearing big earrings and a necklace. Mrs. Kelly takes square dancing very seriously, Juliana whispered to George. George's eyes opened wide. Square dancing? Juliana nodded. Mrs. Kelly loves folk dances. George gulped. That Alex kid hadn't been kidding. This was every fourth grade boy's worst nightmare. Now, class, it's been a while since we did traditional American square dancing, Mrs. Kelly said. So I'll demonstrate a few of the steps again. I need a partner. The teacher looked around the room. George, how about you? George felt his eyes bugged out like this. Me? He asked nervously. I never actually square danced before. No problem, Mrs. Kelly exclaimed. This will be your first lesson. Oh, man. Like it wasn't bad enough being the new kid. Now George was going to be the new kid who dances with the teacher. Class, this is a do-si-do, Mrs. Kelly said while folding her arms in front of her. George folded his arms too. Now we walk around each other, Mrs. Kelly told George. George followed whatever Mrs. Kelly did. As he circled around her, the smelly, flowery perfume that she was wearing made his nose itch. So George wrinkled and crinkled his nose up as he danced. George heard somebody laugh. It probably looked like he was making faces at his teacher, but he wasn't. Terrific, Mrs. Kelly said. Now we'll try the promenade. George, you take my hand and... George didn't hear a word Mrs. Kelly said after that. All he could think about was that he was holding his teacher's hand, and Mrs. Kelly's hand was all wet and sweaty. That was really bad because George's palms were sweating too. That meant he was swapping sweat with his teacher. One by one, Mrs. Kelly did the dance moves. They had strange names like sachet, do paso, and something that sounded like almond. And George had to do them all with his teacher. Finally, Mrs. Kelly set him back to be Juliana's partner. Sure, he was still going to have to square dance, but at least Juliana was a kid. Mrs. Kelly turned on the music. Then she began clapping her hands and stomping her foot. Okay, swing your partner, round you go, Mrs. Kelly called out to the beat of the music. Then everybody do-si-do. Then Mrs. Kelly did something really weird. She started to yodel. Yodel-a-hoo! Now promenade your partner home, Mrs. Kelly said. Come on now, don't let her roam. Huh? George had already forgotten what a promenade meant. But Juliana knew. She grabbed George's hand and started dragging him around the gym floor. Alamande left and meet your friends, Mrs. Kelly called. Then turn around and come back again. Now George was totally confused. Was he supposed to turn to the left or was he supposed to turn all the way around? Since George wasn't sure what to do, he did both. He spun around to the left and then... thud. George tripped and landed right on his butt. Oof, George groaned. Some kids started laughing. Mrs. Kelly came over. Are you all right? She asked. George looked down at his untied shoe. Yeah, he said. I just tripped over my shoelace. George wished the kids would stop laughing. George didn't want Mrs. Kelly to think he'd been making fun of square dancing. But Mrs. Kelly wasn't angry. In fact, she gave George a big, gummy smile. It's okay, she assured him. Maybe I should just sit out and watch, George suggested hopefully, so I don't mess things up for everyone else. I can learn a lot by watching. Don't be silly, Mrs. Kelly said. Just tie your shoelace and get ready to do-si-do. Yes, Mrs. Kelly, George said. He stood up and got ready to do-si-do one more time. A few moments later, the kids were dancing again. Yeehaw! Mrs. Kelly kept shouting and stomping her foot. Swing your partner round and round. Don't let those feet leave the ground. George tried his hardest not to fall again. Boy, Edith B. Sugarman Elementary School was definitely a strange place. And that's the end of chapter 3. Tomorrow we'll do chapter 4. I love you so much. It's a cold night tonight, so make sure you have nice, comfy, warm pajamas and maybe a hot of nice hot chocolate. I love you much. Sweet dreams, my loves.